This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
On this special day, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. And we start in China, where the country has held a grand ceremony to mark the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the party's Central Committee, delivered a keynote speech. He reviewed the party's history and achievements and called on young Chinese to carry on the legacy. CGTN's Hui Huyao has more.
A dignified march across Tiananmen Square at the heart of Beijing. The honor guards marched on the red carpet and raised the Chinese flag. Around 70,000 spectators watched the ceremony on Tiananmen Square, including party members and the general public. In his speech, President Xi Jinping, also the General Secretary of the party, highlighted the CPC's journey over the past century. One of the greatest achievements, he said, was to build a moderately prosperous society.
On this special occasion, it's my honor to declare on behalf of the party and the people that through the continued efforts of the whole party and the entire nation, we have realized the first centenary goal of building a moderately prosperous society in all respects. This means that we have brought about a historic resolution to the problem of absolute poverty in China. And we're now marching with confident strides towards the second centenary goal of building China into a great modern socialist country in all respects. This is the great and glorious accomplishment for the Chinese nation, for the Chinese people, and for the Communist Party of China.
A 3,000-person choir gave a performance. They included students of different ages, from elementary school pupils to college students.
In the new era, our young people should make it their mission to contribute to national rejuvenation and aspire to become more proud, confident, and assured in their identity as Chinese people, so that they can live up to the promise of their youth and the expectations of our times, our party, and our people.
Together, they sang several songs that are very familiar to the Chinese, many of which were composed in wartime. And a performance in the sky as well. Military helicopters and fighter jets formed the numbers 171 to signify centenary and the date July 1st.
We must take resolute action to utterly defeat any attempt towards Taiwan independence and work together to create a bright future for national rejuvenation. No one should underestimate the resolve, the will, and the ability of the Chinese people to defend their national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
President Xi called on party members to continue working together to realize the Chinese dream. That is to build China into a strong, prosperous, and harmonious nation. The CPC went from a small group of around 50 members to now one of the world's largest political parties with more than 95 million members. Party officials say its ability to weather many storms shows the party's strength and vitality.
We must tighten the party's organizational system, work hard to train high-caliber officials who have both moral integrity and professional competence, remain committed to improving party conduct, upholding integrity in combating corruption, and root out any elements that would harm the party's advanced nature and purity and any viruses that would erode its health.
Over the past century, China has been transformed from a poor and backward country to the world's second largest economy. As the CPC celebrates this important milestone today, a new chapter has also begun. The party says it plans to draw experience and strength from history as it forges ahead to further rejuvenate the nation and, more importantly, to build a better life for the Chinese people.
伟大光荣正确的中国共产党万岁！伟大光荣英雄的中国人民万岁！
Chu Huiyao, CGTN, reporting from Tiananmen Square in Beijing.
China has achieved its goal of building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, or an all-round Xiaokang society. The concept covers economic, political, cultural, social and ecological developments. China now has the largest middle-class population in the world. That's about 400 million people. It has also significantly increased the education level of the entire population. In 2010, the number of people with university education was 9,000 per 100,000 people on the Chinese mainland. That rose to over 15,000 in 2020. China also ranked 85th on the UN Human Development Index in 2018. The index measures average achievement in 3 basic dimensions of human development: a long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living. Well, we're now joined by Dr. David Monyai. He's the co-director, University of Johannesburg, at the Confucius Institute and Center for Africa-China Studies. Dr. Monyai, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Now, today, President Xi Jinping addressed a ceremony marking a CPC centenary. What is your take on his speech?
It was a landmark speech in terms of uniting the Chinese people and taking a historical background from 1921 to up to now. I think what was central is that at every turn, the CPC relied and depended on the people, and all achievements since 1949, while in power, it tracked how the party managed to work with people on the ground, reforms that were made in 1978 up to now. And all these remarkable achievements were due to unity and solidarity with the international community. I think those issues came up. The record speaks for itself, as you have read, the yardsticks in terms of the achievements made by China.
Well, Dr. Monyai, China, through a CPC, has achieved tremendous transformation from standing up and growing prosperous to becoming strong. So what can Africa learn from this?
There are a number of areas in which Africans would learn from China. It's not a question of copying everything. It's just a question of taking issues, certain reforms, certain policies, and ensure that they can be infused with Africa's own environment and culture and civilization, particularly on issues of closing the gap between the rural and urban through infrastructure, the question of education, high levels of education from crèche, primary up to high school and technicums, and couple that with the question of health, ensuring that people can live a better life through a good agricultural, so that people can eat well. So I think what the Chinese Communist Party has done is to show to the world that it is indeed possible to uplift 800 million people out of poverty in a short space of time.
Well, it is 100 years later. How has the CPC been able to stay strong and for such a long time? And what has been its impact in Africa?
The impact in Africa is huge. I think it goes back to 1955 to the Bandung Conference, in which China and the entire African continent had so much in common, and up to now still have so much in common. The mere fact that the post-1945 world order led by United States and Western countries excluded China, excluded the African continent, and therefore there was an issue of fighting imperialism. Africa was colonized, And therefore, China played a central role in assisting African nationalist movements in liberation. In power, the Chinese Communist Party also worked hand in hand with African governments in assisting on areas of development. And with the opening up to today, I think we see massive infrastructure development on the African continent. And this relationship is going in other areas, in space, the ocean economy. It's moving, particularly in education, in light of the health crisis we face due to the COVID-19 crisis.
Dr. David Manyai joining us there from Johannesburg. Thank you. Well, we earlier spoke to Adere Cavins, a PhD graduate of International Relations at the Central China Normal University. Cavins is based in Nairobi, Kenya.
I think it was very exciting to watch the Chinese government and the people mark 100 years since the founding of the Communist Party of China. It's a major milestone for any party around the world. And more enlivening was the message that President Xi Jinping delivered during his address to the world. And I think listening through his speech, you get a sense of how much the Chinese people and the Chinese government have worked together to overcome very serious past challenges, and as well as to register very huge milestones that the Chinese society boasts of today. It was great to see him, highlight some of the achievements, including transforming China into a moderately prosperous society, which was a major goal set by the party. This is important because China last year was declared, free from absolute poverty, a major challenge that still persists around the world. Today's China is the second largest economy in the world. Chinese people are stronger, more confident about their fate compared to the time that they were starting the party back in 1921. By highlighting the fact that China was more willing to work with other like-minded societies to transform the condition of human people across the world was simply admirable. And I think there are a number of issues that also came through the speech. One of them is that China today does not tolerate external interference. And so there was a major revelation by the president of China that that society today is stronger and is willing to stand on its 2 feet without subject to external interference. There was also a very important point from President Xi about the idea of multilateralism, people working together across borders to solve some of the pressing challenges facing humanity today. So listening to him, it was a speech of hope, it was a speech of resilience, but it was also a speech of aspiration, because the challenges that China has overcome only provide a perfect backdrop to work towards overcoming even more challenges that that society is likely to face in the future, as we know that societies go through transformations. So I believe that they have laid a very good ground to work together to achieve even more successes in the next coming decades.
Well, the centenary of the Communist Party of China coincides with the 23rd anniversary of South Africa and China forging diplomatic ties. Over the years, the relationship between the two countries has gained growing strategic and global significance. The high-level people-to-people exchanges mechanism has seen many benefits from the partnership. Amid the CPC centenary celebrations, South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress, has expressed its intention to continue forging closer ties with the Chinese government.
The CPC has been a great friend of Africa. In many ways, of course, competing and I must say that competing with the West, whose democracy has always been very much it's our way or the highway, whereas what we respect about the CPC is the non-interference in domestic policy, and for that we are eternally grateful. And now with COVID, they have provided the vaccine to our countries. We in South Africa are at the moment making sure that we can use it. We have a regulatory framework that must be followed, and it is almost there with Sinovac. We have a very a very healthy trade relationship, which maybe earlier on in the 60s we didn't have because of the apartheid regime. But remember that our relationship with the CPC could only really be fully developed after 1994. Before 1994, it was the support that the liberation movement would get from a progressive a political party, political institution, political movement like the Chinese Communist Party. Now it is a strategic relationship. Its benefits are enormous. We do have to ensure that our leaders talk to the leadership of China on an ongoing basis, have the discussions with the Chinese leadership that also shares the experience of the knowledge that they have. Look, we cannot deny the depth of knowledge on technology, agriculture.
Ties between China and Ethiopia date back to the 1970s. For over 4 decades, the two countries have increased cooperation across sectors, including in trade and development. China has also donated life-saving assistance to Ethiopia's medical sector. The help has boosted the country's public healthcare system. And leading the latest team of Chinese doctors stationed in Ethiopia is the dedicated Dr. Liu Ruiqiang. This is his story.
来到非洲之前呢，是害怕非洲。说来到非洲之后，是爱上非洲。走了之后说想念非洲。我们和这边同事，这个工作的非洲的朋友，我们都建立了深厚的友谊。
Nestled on the outskirts of the capital Addis Ababa is the Terunesh Beijing Hospital. It is here where we find Dr. Liu Ruiqiang. When he was young, he wanted to become a doctor to help sick children. Now, as a certified urologist, he volunteers to share his knowledge and skills with doctors in Ethiopia. But the journey to get here has not been easy.
As the team leader, I signed up without hesitation. At the time, my mother was 90 and my father was 86. My father was more supportive, but my mother was worried that I was going to Africa. She thought Africa was too far away. But before I went on the expedition, my father needed cataract surgery. During the pre-op exam, my father found out he had advanced lung cancer. So I was under a lot of pressure before I came to Ethiopia. I was hoping that my father would recover before I came here. But on January 11, 2021, when I got off work, I received a message from my family that my father had left us. At this time, because there was still a team here, I couldn't go back to China to see my father's last moments.
Coping with the grief of the loss, the dedicated doctor found the courage to continue his mission in Ethiopia. For 1 year, the 56-year-old led a group of 15 Chinese medical professionals with different specialities. These Chinese doctors can be seen every day in the various departments of the hospital. They are ready and waiting on standby to handle any incoming emergencies.
There are no neurosurgeons at this hospital. Traffic accidents, injuries and other emergencies are very common here in Ethiopia. I often get emergency calls day and night. 3 days ago, at 11 p.m., I got an emergency call. A patient from a car accident had been brought in by the police with an intracranial bleed. The patient could have died if the operation was not done on time. So I performed an emergency operation which lasted more than 2 hours. The operation was relatively successful and the patient is out of danger.
China sent its first medical mission to Ethiopia in 1974. and it's been providing medical assistance to the East African country ever since. As part of their continued support, the 22nd batch of Chinese medical doctors is donating much-needed supplies to the Tigray Beijing hospital. The team has also prepared a few boxes of protective equipment to aid nurses and doctors as they treat patients with coronavirus. Medicine and equipment have advanced, but Ethiopia is still developing its healthcare sector. The Chinese doctors here have come up with creative ways to treat patients.
Some necessary medical equipment and instruments are in short supply, so many projects cannot be carried out. So our doctors have to adapt to such conditions. The doctors have to do some creative work here. For example, in neurosurgery, we made simple medical instruments for surgery, which allowed us to turn open surgeries into minimally invasive ones.
People from across the city come to the hospital for acute and chronic illnesses. This patient is here to remove prostate tissue in order to restore the normal flow of urine. Dr. Liu carries out the minimally invasive surgery, the first of its kind in Ethiopia. The surgery is performed using a robotic arm, which provides more mobility and precision. This approach means less blood lost, a shorter stay in the hospital, and a faster recovery time for the patient. Long after Dr. Liu and his team's mission is over, this tree of friendship and their teachings are sure to leave a lasting mark at the Tigray Beijing Hospital. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, July the 1st is also the day when the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region celebrates its return to China. This year marks 24 years since that happened. China's national flag and the flag of the Hong Kong SAR were raised as the national anthem was played at the Golden Bauhinia Square. Our reporter Shu Dan has more.
The flag-raising ceremony on Golden Bauhinia Square in Wan Chai marks the beginning of the celebrations for the 24th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China. Acting Chief Executive John Lee, along with hundreds of political, business and community leaders, are attending the ceremony, along with a reception at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center in Wan Chai. The city's Chief Executive Carrie Lam is attending the celebrations for the Communist Party of China's 100th anniversary in Beijing on Thursday. Acting Chief Executive John Lee says Hong Kong is bouncing back as the city restores social and political stability.
Hong Kong has faced unprecedented challenges in recent years, with months-long anti-government protests in 2019 and some people abusing loopholes in the city's electoral system, in a bid to paralyze the administration and damage the relationship between the central government and Hong Kong.
The acting chief executive said the introduction of the national security law and improvements to Hong Kong's electoral system over the past year have helped restore order. He praised the central government for its role in these areas. He said the proper implementation of the one country, two systems principle has been guaranteed, allowing the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to take advantage of the Chinese mainland's rapid development. John Lee said he has full confidence in Hong Kong's future as the Hong Kong SAR's economy and jobless rate significantly improves, while people's lives are returning to normal as social distancing restrictions are relaxed due to the improving COVID-19 situation.
Our team has higher than ever confidence in Hong Kong's prospects. In the coming year, we will continue to uphold national security with determination and ensure the proper implementation of the one country, two systems principle. We will strive ahead with perseverance.
Hong Kong's authorities say they remain committed to safeguarding national security. In his speech, John Lee emphasized that as long as Hong Kong's residents stay united, their city will surely move forward and reach new heights. Judan, CGTN, Hong Kong.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The Ethiopian government announces unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. And the Tunisian government extends a night curfew.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
On to Burkina Faso now, where President Roch Marc Christian Kabore has taken over as Minister of Defense from Sheriff Sai. This follows demands from the opposition for the resignation of the Prime Minister and Minister of Defense over insecurity in the country. The opposition scheduled two-day protests on July the 3rd and the 4th, in which they were to pay tribute to victims of terrorism. Kabore, however, asked for a postponement of the protests. Burkina Faso has been experiencing civilian attacks by Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State-affiliated groups. In June, more than 130 people were killed in a suspected jihadist attack, considered the deadliest since 2015. The Ethiopian government says it has withdrawn its army from most of Tigray because the Tigray People's Liberation Front is no longer a threat to its sovereignty. Since November of last year, government troops have been fighting forces loyal to the TPLF, the former ruling party in Tigray. Ethiopian officials say it is now the TPLF which should be held accountable for everything happening in Tigray, including humanitarian aid. Here is CGTN's Gerum Chala with more.
Talking to the media, the State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Redwan Hussein, and head of Ethiopia's Defense Engineering Department, Lieutenant General Bach Adebele, said the withdrawal of the Ethiopian army from Mekelle, the capital of Tigray, and other towns is a political decision.
Even if we declare ceasefire just because we are there, they will continue claiming that the government has killed people after doing it themselves. After blocking access roads, they will blame us. So therefore, we have decided to withdraw our troops and make it clear for everyone. This will also pave the way for the farmers to do their work free of conflict. This is a political decision. By no means is it a military decision.
When we entered Tigray, we aimed to undertake a law enforcement mission there. We had no intention of liberating Mekelle or other cities of the region in the first place. The value of Mekelle back then and its value now are incomparable. Then it was the center of gravity and the center for the outlaws, and we had to capture it. But today, Mekelle is a burden to us. We are policing gangs as it has lost its relevance.
Still, TPLF sources say it's them who drove the Ethiopian government force out of Mekelle and other strategic towns in Tigray. They promised they would continue their offensive until what they called all alien forces are no longer present in the region. Ethiopia's army says if there is a need for it to return to Mekelle, it will.
We can no longer exert any effort to fight this junta. TPLF is no longer a threat to Ethiopia's sovereignty. It was a threat back then when it had military and political capabilities, not today. By the way, if they dare to provoke any conflict and never respect the ceasefire proposed, we will return and enter into Mekelle in no time. We can do it today if need be. But I assure you, the damage will be beyond imagination.
The government also said from now on it won't take responsibility for any happenings in its northern region.
Those who have claimed the Ethiopian government has denied them humanitarian access roads, now they can maneuver around to deliver aid. They had this chance before, but we were the culprits in their eyes. Now we are out, and let's see what will happen. The international community must focus mainly on providing aid for the most vulnerable and place its blame where it belongs.
Ethiopia has also confirmed the withdrawal of Eritrean troops from Tigray, and sources from TPLF also verified this. The hope now is for the unilateral ceasefire declared by the federal government to be also shared by TPLF so that peace talks can finally begin. Grumtara, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The Tunisian government on Tuesday extended the hours of a night curfew in an effort to stop the rapid spread of COVID-19. The directive comes as the North African country hit a daily record of nearly 6,000 cases since the start of the pandemic. The new curfew hours, starting on Thursday, will begin at 8 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. Adnan Chauchi reports.
Tunisian authorities have mobilized the national army in several regions where a full lockdown has been announced.
The government will impose a strict general lockdown and isolate any town, city or region where the number of infections is over 400 cases per 100,000 inhabitants over the past 14 days. The regional authorities will ensure enforcement of restrictions imposed during curfew hours.
The government will ban all gatherings until July 11th. The COVID-19 task force revealed that the health system can no longer cope with the high number of infections and deaths.
The daily number of deaths is 82 cases this week, while it was between 52 and 62 deaths last week. The number of deaths recorded exceeded the health authorities' expectations.
Many Tunisians, especially in the private sector, have criticized the new restrictive measures. Small business owners at the central market in Tunis say they do not believe in the deterrent effect of curfew enforcement.
It is unacceptable to impose new curfew hours. This decision affects all businesses. Unlike civil servants, we cannot earn a living if we don't work. People need to wear face masks and get vaccinated. This is the government's responsibility.
The Scientific Committee to combat the coronavirus called for a national lockdown for at least 6 weeks to break the chain of infection. However, the Prime Minister's cabinet rejected the proposal.
In May 2020, Tunisia recorded 0 new coronavirus cases after 2 months of full lockdown. Experts assert that another general lockdown in Tunisia will have negative repercussions on the population and plunge the country into a social and economic crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
As Uganda battles its second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, a private company is supporting government efforts by offering free oxygen to public health facilities. The country is currently facing a shortage in oxygen due to a surge in COVID-19 cases. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Making sure hospitals are supplied with enough oxygen. These workers are producing supplies for COVID-19 patients.
During this time of COVID, especially the second lockdown, where it's about 2 weeks and a half now, the demand for oxygen has actually increased in the various hospitals.
These technicians refill about 350 cylinders every day, and it is supplied to public health facilities at no cost.
Before the outbreak of COVID-19, this oxygen plant was producing 800 cubic meters of oxygen. But now they are producing about 3,200 cubic meters to meet the growing demand of oxygen in the health facilities.
Uganda has so far registered close to 80,000 cases and over 900 deaths. And the number of those being hospitalized is on the rise. Health workers say they are overwhelmed by the demand for oxygen.
You find a patient requiring 70 liters of oxygen per minute. And yet the normal patient in the normal ICU requires between 1 and 10. So one patient in COVID ICU consumes the oxygen that would be required by 10 very sick patients in a normal ICU.
To offset the shortage of oxygen in hospitals, Uganda's military is also setting up a plant to produce medical oxygen. Besides production of oxygen, doctors are also encouraging the locals to observe health guidelines such as wearing a mask, washing hands frequently with soap, and maintain social distance. Hopefully, these and many other measures could help contain the spread of the virus and also save the lives of those in critical condition. Hilary Isiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. Uganda's vulnerable groups will receive $30 in COVID-19 cash relief as registration starts. And Tunisia backs the creation of an African central bank to boost the continent's economic integration.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
In Uganda, the government has started registering the expanded 16 identified vulnerable groups eligible to receive about $30 in COVID-19 cash relief. Disbursement is expected to start within the next 2 weeks. The government aims to reach about 500,000 households with this relief cash, as CGTN's Isabel Nakiria tells us from Kampala.
Hassan Kasiria's van has been packed up for nearly 2 weeks since Uganda went into COVID-19 lockdown. He is a taxi driver in Kampala, but since public transport was suspended, he's not earning a living.
We taxi drivers are not doing well at all. From the owners of the taxi to us, who are employed to drive. The ordinary person is bad off. I call upon the president to remember us, the local people.
Hassan now spends time playing board games with his friends just to pass time. He's among the vulnerable groups who will receive a $30 cash transfer to help him and his family during lockdown. Families are expected to use the money for purchasing food and other household items. But Hassan says it's too little to meet his family's needs.
I beg the president to open up the country so that we can work and take care of our families, because the government will not be able to reach everyone with that money. When will it even reach us?
The government aims to reach about 500,000 households with this relief cash. The money will be transferred to mobile phone accounts. The cash transfers are yet to begin flowing into people's accounts, even when people have been home for close to 2 weeks. Last year, vulnerable groups were given food, but there were concerns that it wasn't enough and some people missed out in the handouts. A mobile van will also move to communities with cash to hand out to people without mobile phone accounts.
This 42 days vulnerable group is strictly those whom the lockdown measures interrupted their daily work, and their daily work is only when they work that they can earn something to eat.
The Uganda Bureau of Statistics will send teams to identify people eligible for this money. Categories listed include taxi drivers, hairdressers, teachers, musicians, pubs and nightclub workers, among many more. The government imposed a 42-day lockdown on 18th June to try and bring down infection rates, which had surged to over 1,000 per day. Uganda is going through a new wave of coronavirus that scientists say is more deadly. The Minister of Health says the numbers are now going down, but some urgent restrictions on movement are preventing many people from accessing testing centers. And many who depend on daily earnings, like Hassan, say the government should allow them to work under strict rules so they can sustain their livelihoods. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Tunisia's central bank governor has backed calls for the creation of an African central bank to enhance cooperation in the fields of finance and integration and modernization of African payment systems. The creation of the African Union-backed bank is seen as key to drive an economic rebound in the continent after the uncertainty caused by the pandemic. From Tunis, here's CGTN's Adnan Chauchi with more details.
The Tunisian Apex Bank governor noted that the African Central Bank's purpose will help build a common monetary policy in order to accelerate economic integration in Africa. Marwan al-Abbasi added that Tunisian transactions with the continent are limited and represent only 2% of the country's exports and 0.5% of its imports.
The African Central Bank project would boost Africa's economic integration. Efforts should be directed towards multiplying air, sea and land links between African countries. This will enhance the presence of banks to promote business and accelerate the establishment of free trade areas at the regional and continental level.
Experts say the World Bank expects investments ranging between $80 and $100 billion in Africa over the next 10 years. In addition, the IMF expects the total additional financing required by African countries during the period 2021-2025 to reach $285 billion.
Tunisia is facing a difficult economic crisis and a lack of liquidity. Many African economies are also facing similar challenges. That's why it's necessary to look for ways of financing investment and development projects in Africa.
Economists believe that the fight against the pandemic is a top priority in Africa. Therefore, successful vaccine rollout should drive an economic rebound.
As long as the vaccines are not available in Africa, we can't talk about economic recovery. The COVID-19 vaccine procurement is the real problem. Reopening the economy depends on the vaccine rollout.
Analysts assert that African central banks are boosting cooperation in the fields of finance, integration, as well as upgrading African payment systems.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia called for mobilizing the support of multilateral financial institutions to back public investment in the digital sector in Africa. Al-Abbasi added that bilateral and multilateral cooperation are necessary to revive investment and growth in the continent. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt this week is marking the 7th anniversary since President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took office in 2014. The North African state was rocked by months of uncertainty before an uprising toppled former President Mohamed Morsi and the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. From Cairo, CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks back at the country's economic transformation 7 years on.
When he took the oath of office in June 2014, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi knew he was in for a rough ride. 2 uprisings and years of volatility had taken their toll on Egypt's economy.
The economic situation in Egypt was extremely dire. There was no security. Investors fled the country. Over 5,200 factories closed down. There was a shortage in energy, no fuel, no electricity, and the foreign reserves dropped to $13 billion, which was not enough to cover 3 months' worth of import needs. Unemployment exceeded 13%, and the deficit had risen to 13.7%. Egypt was on the verge of bankruptcy.
The Egyptian president quickly embarked on 5 years of austerity measures that included the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. Challenges on the road included a crackdown on terrorism, which had damaged vital sectors such as tourism and withheld investments in the country. However, the rebuilding process continued, with support from neighboring Gulf nations, international institutions such as the IMF, and friendly nations like China.
China is like a role model for the manufacturing, because China is a good example for the emerging multinational companies, and it is a role model for the companies that succeeded for globalization, and this is exactly what we want for Egyptian companies to go international and to go overseas. What is very obvious between Egypt and China is a cooperation in the manufacturing sector. Like we are inviting them to share the knowledge of the manufacturing. And we are providing good infrastructure, good facilities so they can come and invest with us in Egypt. So it's a matter of exchanging knowledge with resources.
And the president also shifted focus of his strategy towards the continent.
And one of the very good examples is happening is our cooperation with the African continent. And now you see how important it's turning. Now Egypt is taking a leading position in the continent. And now it's recognized as the country #2 in Africa economically. So definitely there is a big change. There is a very successful execution for the strategy and the plan.
Once stability had been secured, the positive effects of the economic reforms became evident. Egypt was one of only a few countries worldwide that posted positive growth rates amidst the fallout caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
The foreign currency reserves reached over $40 billion. Deficit dropped to 7.5%. Unemployment dropped to 7%. And all this in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic. Exports jumped to $30 billion. President Sisi prioritized local production over imports and establishing local industries to raise production and limit imports. Egypt is now top in attracting foreign direct investment in Africa and second in the Arab world after the United Arab Emirates.
Now marching on to commence his 8th year in office, El-Sisi is pushing on his economic reforms in the North African state. Rebuilding continues, and there's an acceleration of projects to enhance an all-inclusive growth despite the post-COVID challenges which lie ahead. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead.
Sports Scene. Find